This is one I'm fascinated by, and not that I haven't been fascinated by the earlier ones, but avoiding the never-ending proof of concept. Now, I'm a big believer in doing small things and going for benefit and in making a proof of concept, getting out there, learning, failing fast. But how do you avoid that? How do you get the right pilot project? This is a huge challenge. And so we've got our guest coming up to present on this, Rupinder Dhillon. She's the Chief Data Officer with an SVP Data Innovation with and AI with Hudson's Bay Company, HBC. I guess I'm old if I call it HBC, but I've been around a while. So, but I'm thrilled to bring her in here to talk about this. Now, if there's a top 100 list of powerful women who've achieved things, or executives who've achieved things, this lady's on it. But I want to quote one thing that I just loved for the introduction, and just as I'm respectful of opinions, cared about the development, and got things done. Man, I want people to say that about me when I grow up. Rupinder, great to meet you, and it's all yours.
Wow, I feel like I should just, end the discussion on a high note. I don't know how I follow up with that sort of introduction, but thank you. I am absolutely thrilled to be here. I love these sessions. I've been playing in this space now for probably about 6 years, and I love coming to these types of conferences because I no doubt come away with amazing learning every single time, just hearing from my peers. So appreciate being included here. So, like all things during COVID, I'm just gonna get myself a little bit organized here. So you can see my slides, you can hear me, I'm good to go. All right, I take that as a yes. Okay, so thank you for the introduction. I did. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Like I said, having been here or been playing in this space for 6 years now, a lot of lessons learned along the way. A lot of unfortunately sharp corners that we bumped into along the way, and not just me and my teams, but also just talking with other teams and talking with other areas and organizations that are going down this path. And the reason that I thought that this was such an important topic is I still hear, even today, I still hear that machine learning and AI is all hype, right? And that it's not going to materialize the way that organizations think that it's going to materialize. And in my role that I have today, where I get to talk to not just a lot of amazing Canadian companies, but companies that are spanning across the US and spanning across the globe, I know that this is not the case. And I'm very, very passionate about how do we make sure that, I have an affinity to Canadian companies. How do we make sure that this is something that's unlocked for all of us and for all of Canadian organizations, and that we're all really benefiting from it? So wanted to share some perspectives that, again, I've learned along the way from my experiences, but also from learning and hearing from others as well. Talking a little bit about HBC really quickly. HBC, we're the parent company of Hudson's Bay here in Canada, and then Saks Fifth Avenue, and Saks Off Fifth as well, and we span across North America. Before that, I actually ran the AI program for customer experience over at Bell Canada, and that's really what got me hooked in this space. So here's a stat that I heard, and it was a couple of years ago, and I think it's still relevant. I know I'd heard very anecdotally, we launched this project, we tried to make it a go, everybody was all excited, and then, something just happened and it kind of fizzled out. Either, could never find really a path to productionalizing it, or the business moved on to something else. And so those are, I hate hearing those stories because I think for, each one of those stories, I want to hear 10 stories about, here's a project that we made really, really successful, and it made a lasting impact on the organization. And so while I had heard it anecdotally that, here's what was happening in organizations, this stat really, really struck me. because it feeds into that narrative of AI and machine learning is all hype, and something that, you know, I very, very strongly disagree with. And so what I started doing was putting my thoughts down on, you know, what are some of the lessons that we've learned along the way? What guidance can we give? And as we were having these discussions with so many different people, there were common themes that were really popping up that I wanted to share with you all today. So here's my recipe for a successful POC that actually makes it out of either your POC or your pilot phase. And we're going to dig into each of these, but I wanted to just highlight them here as a quick and dirty cheat sheet. One is always make sure that your POC is focusing on a real business problem. There's a lot of projects out there that tend to focus on, you know, this really cool idea that a research team had, but not a clear link to how it would solve a real business problem that an organization is facing today. Secondly, pick something that you can actually deliver. Seems incredibly basic and something that, you know, everyone should know, but you'd be surprised how many projects that I hear about that is really, really complicated right off the bat, and really kind of more immersed in, you know, the technology challenge than it is, you know, actually being able to deliver it. And then thirdly, you have to be able to measure your results and prove and show those results in a way that your organization can understand. So let's dig into these a little bit one by one, right? So number one, does your pilot or does your use case, does it address a problem that your business is actually focused on? What the challenges that we hear over and over again is just getting the business partners interested, getting it on a radar, getting additional funding committed. And the key to that is to make sure that what you're proposing isn't some niche project that, you know, doesn't actually address something that your business is focused on. I think that's the surest way for these types of projects to fizzle out. Your business partners have to be your co-pilots on these projects. And so really have to fight the temptation of making these projects kind of hidden inside a super technical, amazing lab without any real tentacles back into the business. What we learned at early on in Bell was, as we created our AI Labs team, it was so important to make that AI Labs team accessible to the business and within arm's reach of our business teams. And any of the projects we were working on, whether they're, you know, research projects or pilot projects, had critical business partner involvement all the way through, right? You want to make sure that you're selling a message that what you're building and what you're investing in is going to be impactful to the business, and it's going to get you the right attention and support. And it can't be something that's viewed as something that's locked away in your IT or your lab teams. So super critical that you're picking use cases that address a problem that your business teams already have attention on. Secondly, this one has two parts, right? One is, you know, the first part is, can you actually successfully deliver that pilot, right? And really this speaks to, are you making sure that it's simple enough that it's within reach with the right talent, the right infrastructure, and the data that you have today? So do you have the right data? Do you have the right talent? Do you have the right infrastructure to make that pilot successful? But that's really only half of the equation. You know, I've gone through now a couple of examples, you know, even recently at HPC, where, you know, actually being able to take that small pilot and productionalizing it into, you know, full scale to get the full support and benefits is gonna, you know, the pilot might have cost me 100K, but to productionalize it is going to cost me, another 5 million, because in order to make this work in our systems, I have to, I'm just making this up. I have to change the website. I have to redo all the wiring. I have to redo all the connectivity between systems. So if you're starting off early in your AI program, those are not the types of use cases that you want to start with, because those ones are a real rocky road in terms of really being able to scale out and get support for your program. Now, once you've proven that you can do things and you're a little bit further along, absolutely, you have to start picking those use cases that are fully integrated into your systems. But early on, in most cases, you have to get your organization there mentally. So when you're starting out, it's really important to check off, can I deliver it successfully with the results I want in the pilot? And just how feasible is that path to fully productionalize it and scale it out? Another component I think is super important here is just thinking through the peripheral implications of fully realizing the use case benefit, and the fact that needs to fit with a company's culture. And what I mean by this is, I'm a firm believer that the real impact and long-lasting impact of machine learning and AI isn't necessarily going to come from the delivery of the technology and the delivery of the algorithm. It's going to come from what are the processes that exist today that you can really start to redefine as an organization and completely reimagine as an organization to fit that machine learning use case. An example may be how you think about compensation, how you think about how organizations do performance reviews. What kind of metrics do you want to measure your folks on? So, while you want to get to that level eventually, again, you got to start off in a place where, am I going to have to fight through a bunch of peripheral implications to fully realize the benefit of the use case? And do I want to necessarily tie making a change to a company's culture to the success of this small pilot that I'm trying to prove out? Changing culture takes time, right? And if you're getting, and I have no doubt that machine learning and AI and all of the things that we're doing around innovation are going to have great lasting impacts on company culture. But you, right out of the gate, you don't want to have to tie making a change to company culture to the success of the pilot that you are trying to get off the ground right off the bat. The last point here is saving more complex features for later. Again, this is really about defining the scope of a pilot into a chunk that you can really deliver on successfully. In most cases now, people are thinking about machine learning and AI projects as products, right? And even data and analytics as products. So if you bring that product mindset and the fact that you'll deliver features through a roadmap and over time, it really, if you can start thinking about it that way, it really helps in terms of biting off reasonable chunks and chunks that will actually make you successful as you're thinking through a pilot. All right, this last one. Also super critical that I've learned. Can the results be isolated, measured, and tracked during your pilot phase? You have to definitively show and measure the results and show the results and prove that those results are a direct link back to your pilot and what you're trying to do. It's so important. You need to get that buy-in for your measurement methodology as early on as you can in the process. Another reason why your business stakeholders have to be there holding hands with you through this. So it's not just about proving that your algorithm is accurate. It's not about proving lift. It's not about proving precision and recall. It's about proving what is the impact that it's made on the business metric that our our organization cares about. So another reason, like I said, that the business involvement is super critical right out of the gate. Now, in some organizations, there's unfortunately, political battles around ownership and scope and who is responsible and all of those things. So one thing that I've learned is it's actually good to have a neutral team in the organization that's actually measuring and reporting on the results. It really just gets rid of some of the noise, unfortunately, that exists within an organization. The last part here is having a regular cadence for reviewing results with your stakeholders. And stakeholders in this case are not just the folks that are supporting and sponsoring your project. Stakeholders are also all of those folks, those peripheral folks that are going to be absolutely mandatory and important in terms of getting this thing accepted, in terms of getting it rolled out, in terms of getting adoption. It's so important to have all of that set up ahead of time and making sure that you're getting, again, some regular cadence with reviewing your results with your stakeholders and getting their buy-in. So that's what I've learned along the way, and I wanted to open it up to questions and a discussion, because I'd love to hear from the audience on how you would add to this list and change it. What again, the core focus for me has been, and for our organizations has really been, ultimately, you want to be able to drive the adoption of AI machine learning and making sure that you're picking the right use cases to really get the attention and the support that you need across the organization is absolutely so important. So maybe I'll pause there and see if we have any questions.
Just wait. Sorry, it's Jim. I'm back here. We're waiting on some questions from the audience. I have some. If you got time, I've got some questions I'd love to ask you as well. In there, and I want to point out just a couple of things that just the getting buy-in for measurement early. I wish everybody would have that tattooed on them, because have you encountered that where you have a result after the fact and then people say, yeah, but you measured it that way, and because you didn't establish the goalposts early? Has that happened to you? Is that how you learned that piece?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, very early on, as let's face it, there's going to be a resistance to change, and there's going to be a resistance to, doing things differently. And in most cases, an AI team that is coming up with a solution and an algorithm isn't necessarily the team that owns that process. The team that owns that process and is responsible and accountable for that metric is usually another business team. So, when there's that resistance to change, the first thing that people will point to is a disagreement in methodology. Well, you didn't account for this, and that doesn't look at that, and what about this? And so to just get that buy-in right up front and go to stakeholders and say, here's what we're going to do, here's what we're going to measure, here's how we're going to measure it, and here's how often we're going to bring you the results. It really sets a different tone, just right off the bat. Yeah,
it a great lesson to be learned in there. And the business, you talk about finding a business objective and not a cool project. I'll tell you a quick story, because I used to run a worldwide consulting group, and this is before we were actually at HBC. This is decades ago. And one of my consultants came back to me and I said, you're just in total problems. And he said, why? He said, because you told me that the CEO said, forget the IT, I sell socks. And the only answer for him was, I'm here to help you do that. Yeah. We can fall in love with our technology and not make that bridging gap to the executive level. I think it's one of the big mistakes we often make. Have you seen that happen? Have you steered people in the right direction when that does happen?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And somebody said that AI wasn't running the world. That's the voice of AI running the world.
There you go.
That's great. That's perfect. Yeah, I'd forgotten you're on a delay on here, so this is perfect. So let's go back to that idea of keeping in track with the business processes and the business ownership. Is that something that you see?
Yeah. So even having done this for a long time, you can easily, fall into that trap of, I want to solve this problem this way, right? Because you're focused on, I want to build a neural net. Like I want to solve the more complicated way of doing things. And so, I think it's a natural tendency for some of our data science folks to focus on that, because that's what makes them tick, and that's what gets them excited. And so, absolutely, I think it solves two issues. One is it gets the buy-in from the business, and it also gives you a bit of a check and balance to make sure, am I overcomplicating this for what it is that I'm trying to solve, right? Machine learning and AI, you've got tons of different algorithms and things in your tool set to tackle any type of problem. And sometimes it's really important to look at it from the perspective of, what's the most attainable? What is it that I'll be the most successful in? At least even to just create a baseline model and baseline results. Can you improve it over time? Absolutely. Can you make it more, throw in additional features and make it more complex over time? 100%. But the goal right off the bat needs to be, proving that there's value here, proving that it's important to continue to invest. And I think as leaders, that's our job, to make sure that our teams are continuing to go down that path.
Yeah. More questions from the audience in here. I want to get them all in. Since POCs can be lengthy, especially sometimes if I'm doing them, I've taken them over too long sometimes. And this was a learning from this session. How do you combat a potential regime change, or I guess a change of senior decision makers? How do you deal with that if you've got a lengthy POC?
So I don't believe that a POC should be lengthy, right? We really try to bring the product mindset to a machine learning POC or an analytics POC, or really anything that we're doing in the data space, right? And so, to make sure that you're continuing that momentum, there's got to be these almost milestones. We're going to deliver this. If we prove that this works, we push that into production, and then we add to the roadmap, and perhaps what's in your pipeline becomes your POC. But always make sure that you're designing or building for incremental releases, so that you don't kind of get stuck in. First of all, that's another way to get stuck in this kind of POC purgatory, but it also does guard against regime or leadership changes, because you've already pushed a piece into production.
Yeah, so that's where, and you also talk about a regular cadence of bringing your results to the management. I think people often people come to me and say good work speaks for itself. I said no, good work doesn't speak for itself. Good work needs to speak to the people who need it. And
yeah. And as you're bringing that to people and to your stakeholders, it's important. There's two sides of it. It's important that you're educating them on what are the metrics that we typically measure for machine learning, and why are those metrics important, right? However, your story on results should never end with your algorithm metrics. They should always be heavily focused on the actual business metrics. So, we had a reduction in average handle time in the call center. We had an incremental, this much additional gross margin on your markdown optimization. It always has to be in a language that they care about, and always has to be back to those metrics that you aligned on up front.
Yeah, and aligning on them up front. Somebody's asked, what comes first, technology or process, when you're thinking this through? What's the first thing you're thinking about?
Process,
good question, eh?
Yeah. I think I would have to understand what we mean by process. I always lead with the business problem, and therefore probably by extension the process. You've really got to kind of fight the urge to lead with the technology. It's the surest way to kind of lose folks along the way. And maybe there's some clarification on what we mean by process on that question.
Yeah, I think that'd be good to have. But I think it's our eternal sin is you need the technology. You need to know about the technology. These people who say, well, the technology is easy. You just need to get the business results. You know, the technology. Technology is not easy, but it's not what you lead with. Right.
Yeah, technology by no stretch of the imagination is technology easy. However, the technology challenge is achievable. You can get past that. Those are hurdles that you can absolutely fight through. If you don't get the people part of it right, and really focus a lot of time and energy on the people part in change management, adoption, acceptance. It doesn't matter if your technology works, right? Because at the end of the day, it's people also that drive the organization, and that's all the more reason that metrics are so important. Measurement is so important because as much as possible, you want that conversation to be about results, and that's the surest way to make it about the results.
Yeah, and if I take one lesson away from what you said, it's measurements that are important to the business.
Yes.
And you've said get those nailed down right front. And if people take nothing else away from that, get that right, because then you're bringing them something of value. And even if you can show them, you're on your way there. That's great. One more. I think we have time for one more. How crucial is it being clear on what success looks? Well, I think we may have answered that, but how crucial is it being clear on what success looks like for AI and machine learning projects and controlling the expectations of the business? That's actually I think we've talked about how crucial it is for you to talk about the business, but how do you control the expectations of your business leaders?
It's funny because you'll have one set of business leaders who will think that AI can solve world hunger, right? And it's just something miraculous. There's nothing to it. You just put in a bunch of data and it'll tell you exactly what it needs to happen on the back end. And then you have another set of business leaders who, let's face it, traditional brick and mortar retail is done by touch and feel and gut feel, right? So first, I think it's important to understand which set of which camp are you dealing with, right? And on one end, you've got to set the expectation that this is going to take time, right? That your results are going to evolve over time, that, by talking to them about a benchmark, I think always level sets, right? That, hey, our first algorithm right out of the gate, here's the type of results that I'm getting. And I think it's super important to get that out of the gate quickly, right? To level set on here's what we can expect. Then you can have the discussions on, we think that we can get this incremental lift on top of that. So to get a very rudimentary model out quickly, just to help level set expectations of those stakeholders and make that part of your cadence is going to be super important. And then on the second side of it, for those who are non-believers, what I've always said is, look, let me prove it, right? Give me one segment to test on, right? And it'll be small, one segment, my way versus your way. And then let's just see what happens. And then those folks inevitably become the champions alongside when you quietly prove it to them, because you're not trying to show them up in a meeting or anything like that.
Yep. Rod Stewart said it best. Give me a reason to believe, Yeah. No, that's perfect. Thank you so much. I'm having these conversations and I wish could go on even longer in there. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great, and we'll hopefully you'll be there to link up with the people. People can find people who are attending or presenting in the audience. It's there, so please link up with them, share your thoughts, share your experiences, and it's a great thing to do. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care.